Hello again, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome back for the final session of the Energy Storage Summit. So I'd just like to make a quick introduction to the session. So this afternoon we'll be having a very interesting debate around how to ensure safe framework for lithium-based systems. So we'll be talking about all sizes and scales of energy storage applications. We're joined by a very great lineup of speakers, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And the session will be moderated by Dan Taylor, so I'll hand straight over to him. And please just make sure if you've got any questions that you put them in the chat and we'll get them answered. And I hope that you enjoy the session. Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Lucy. Second time lucky. We've done our intros, so they should be pretty swift by now. I'm Dan Taylor. I'm from Ion Ventures, but nobody's here to see me, so I'm going to very quickly ask our esteemed panel to give us a brief introduction about themselves and business and why they're here. So I'm going to first ask Charlie of London Fire Brigade to say hello and introduce himself, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. As noted, Charlie Pugsley, London Fire Brigade. I also represent the National Fire Chiefs Council for Electrical Safety. And while we're not battery technology experts, we've got a very keen interest in ensuring safety.
Thank you, Charlie. LFB doesn't need anything more than that. Justin McNamara from Lion Tamer, please.
Thank you, Dan. So good afternoon and good morning to everybody. I'll make this a brief introduction. I'm here to represent Lion Tamer. I actually work for a company called Extralis, part of Honeywell. I'm a fairly experienced 30-year veteran of the safety industry, focused in the last 20 years on early detection and specifically in the last few months on off-gas detection using the Lion Tamer technology. Really passionate, as I say, about safety, and my early interactions with the battery industry have really impressed me with the knowledge, enthusiasm and expertise. So I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into this session, so to speak.
Cool, thanks, Justin. And from Colorado, we have Mike from the Electric Power Research Institute. Mike.
Thanks, Justin. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Simpson, a senior technical leader with the Electric Power Research Institute. We are a membership-based collaborative working primarily with our members, which are utilities all over the world, to support research and development with them. And we've been doing a lot of work recently, actually over the last several years, in energy storage safety, most recently focused on fire safety. I've been working with energy storage systems for about 16 years now, and both research and commercial deployment, and have focused my time at EPRI on these issues.
Cool, thanks, Mike. Catalina Rozo from the Electricity Storage Network and Zenobē Energy.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Lucy, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining now here on this session. So my name is Catalina Rozo, and I'm the Regulation and Public Affairs Lead for Zenobē Energy. But today I'm here as a chair of the Sustainability Supply Chain and obviously Health and Safety Group from the ESN. The ESN, if you're not familiar, Electricity Storage Network, an industry group created in 2008. We cover a broad range of technologies and have a broad range of stakeholders involved, including manufacturers, developer users, and network operators. And I will tell you more about our work on fire safety later. Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much. Last but not least, just joining, Frank from the REA, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks Dan, and thanks Lucy. My name is Frank Gordon. I'm head of policy at REA. We are a trade association for the energy storage and renewable industry, as well as clean technologies. We've got about 120 members in the energy storage space, and this has been a very important area for our members, which we're keen to see progress, and so look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Cool, good stuff. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to start with Catalina, if that's okay, and just ask you to give us a quick debrief or a summary on the recent draft recommendations that the ESN published, and maybe an idea of the kind of key messages you're trying to push to the industry at the moment.
Perfect. So I will start saying why we're interested in that. As I say, we have a broad range of stakeholders, and we've seen the deployment. We will see the deployment of storage increase, specifically lithium-ion. We know the very important role that storage plays, but we want to ensure the safety, so the safety of the public, the safety of the first responders, the safety of the sites, the environment, and the safety or the industry reputation. So what we're trying to do with the working group first was inform the users, but also we want to work with different geographies. So we have Mike, we want to understand the different stakeholders involved and have some practical recommendations. I will talk to you about 3 specific recommendations, and because the others, I think we will have a better overview from the other panelists. So the first thing we think we should be doing better is listening with the fire brigade. When a site is in construction, I'm going to talk more about large-scale storage. We should proactively, and perhaps should be a requirement, to go to the nearest fire brigade, inform it of the site, the technology, how they should respond, give them a single line diagram and a site visit for them to have a better understanding of the site and the risk. Second, we need better signaling and instructions. It should be very clear on how they should respond, what's the technology, where are the risks, and there should be a better signaling, probably with stickers. Not all they cannot see what's the chemistry inside the battery or how it works inside a container, and not everyone is an expert. So bear in mind, some will have specific trainer, but maybe Charlie can tell us some of our fire will be volunteers, so they don't have specific training. Also, we should have perhaps a number of the O&M, and we will discuss it later on how the state of the battery can affect, or perhaps the state of the gas. Has it been like a thermal escape? Do we have some risk of explosion, so we could know that about if we know the toxicity of the gases, how much gas has escaped. So all this information should be available for the fire brigade. And I think this is very quick things that we could implement. These recommendations will be out formally on the next week or 2. We'll send to base the health and safety group, but other stakeholders that can actually take actions and change standards. And we will communicate with our members, which everybody is keen to improve the health and safety or the site. And we have collaborated with a broad range of stakeholders involved. So I think that's one of our recommendations, but we will discuss other subjects. And if something's missing from our more broad recommendation, I will come back. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much. Probably sensible to move to you, Charlie, actually, if that's all right. And kind of given presumably first-hand experience in dealing with various events, what would be really useful for the fire brigade? Like how accessible would a real-time database be, for example, when you need it? I nearly said in the heat of the moment, but when you need it at the kind of at the last minute, how reliable would those be? How useful would they be? And given the, I guess the kind of follow-on question is, given the growth of the market and the proliferation of the fact that people are having batteries in their utilities and their kitchens and stuff, and there are portable devices everywhere, presumably you guys are pretty well versed with dealing with it. How do you even keep up the pace of deployment, I guess?
Thanks, Dan. I'll try and break that question down into a few chunks. I think the first point is that it's always a concern for us that with rapidly progressing technology, such as innovation in the home or battery storage, energy storage, it is really difficult because we tend to be behind the learning curve. There's still international debate, for example, about what to do about electric vehicles, how to fight fires if you get thermal runaway. So there's no single clear picture. In terms of helping the fire service, as Catalina noted, you could have a fire service in a rural area that has perhaps volunteer firefighters, and their level of training won't be perhaps as significant as perhaps in London. So the national average is for a fire service in the UK is going to about 4,000 fires a year. London, we go to around about 20,000, so we see a lot more. So we are lucky in that respect in the level of training. But really, in terms of where we could get helpful information, it is, so first of all, if there's anyone on site, then if there's any signage. So in the old days, we had HAZChem signs for chemicals, cylinders, things like that. So something there as a visible aid memoir. And of course, sharing data with the local fire service, so we can either keep that on our mobile data terminal or even old-fashioned cards if need be, but just about having that information. The key thing is with different technologies, there's going to be, how can I put it, an early guidance on whether to stand back and perhaps do a controlled burn, different, if you like, firefighting basic techniques. Can really help us in terms of ensuring firefighter safety and also protecting the environment. So I guess two final points to quickly touch on. The other bit is about the location of the site. Now, if the site, the storage site, was near in a rural situation, but near a site of environmental, high value, so to speak, or protected species, or if it's in a very densely built up urban environment, the risk will be much bigger than if it's just, if you like, a slightly larger installation in the middle of a field. So from that point of view, I think that we do have a challenge there in terms of it's not just about the response and the risk and everything else, but it's also about the context in which the situation is. Hopefully I've answered most of those points, Dan, but if not, please give me a prod.
No, absolutely. And on a personal note, it's thoroughly interesting, really, because I guess you've got everything from, we're generally a lot of us talking about static applications and the fields full of batteries, so to speak. But of course, there are tons and tons of them on four wheels moving up and down motorways and all over the place. And I guess there's a huge amount of learning in the more recent past to know how to deal with those. Mike, probably a good point for you to chip in, really. What experiences have the US drawn from this? You've been in the battery storage or the energy storage industry for longer than the rest of us, by the sounds of it. So what's been the kind of learning curve for you guys, and what's been really beneficial in supporting an adoption of technology in vehicles and in homes and in other applications?
Thanks, Dan. And yeah, it's interesting to look at the history of it. And admittedly, my career actually did start in other uses of battery energy storage. I was originally came out of the aerospace sector. And so if you look at where lithium ion proliferated, it was initially in the aerospace sector where the tolerance for high costs at the time were much higher, and then moved into consumer electronics because of some of the needs of portable devices, obviously, and then eventually into EVs, which really grew the large format market. And you all know all this, that really helped bring the cost down to a level where the stationary storage industry could rise. And the lessons learned along the way were very similar to what we're seeing in the stationary storage industry now. Of course, these failures have been known, but I think the realization domestically in the US, but also this is true across the world, is that the large concentration of high levels of energy, first of all, high levels of energy for a single cell, and then many, many cells, potentially thousands of cells in a single enclosure, that poses a different kind of risk than one cell in a cell phone, or even 1/40th of that in a vehicle, so to speak. So I think the understanding of that quantity of hazard, and then also specifically the explosion hazard that can be a little bit different from EVs when gases can concentrate in a large enclosure. And so what's been going on in the US is, of course, the developments with UL, the 9540 and 9540A test standard, and of course NFPA 855, And then some specific developments around that have been going on in New York City, as well as California Fire Code, that are aligning with and then I think being adopted by the International Fire Code, as it from 2018, some of the preliminary pieces, and then in 2021 more of a formal alignment between NFPA 855 and the International Fire Code to align on that guidance. I think is really useful. And then of course we know there have been incidents around the world, but the incident that occurred in Arizona in 2019 is certainly adding several lessons learned now, with several fully public reports available. There's 3 really good dense reports that the industry is learning from that came out of groups in the US. So I think there's some good activity there that we're trying to align with those other cases around the world. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, sure. What happens in terms of kind of knowledge sharing and dissemination? Do you liaise with people like Catalina in the UK and make sure that the learning is spread as far and wide? How does that work? Do you work with other trade bodies any way you can do, or what's the sort of structure there?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course, the Electric Power Research Institute, we have a lot of efforts focused in the US, but we are a global organization. We've got our own folks around the world, as well as several consultants that we work with, and of course, several partners and several members are the utilities that help fund our work around the world. So we coordinate through a few methods, but one of our 3 major tenets is technology transfer or knowledge transfer of the research that we do. So we obviously put out formal publications. Several of them are free to the public. We do a lot of webinars, I think like everyone does now, plenty of webcasts to help spread that knowledge and also bring experts to the forefront, much like this conference is doing. And then there are several projects that we're doing. We're fortunate to work with an incident investigation happening in the UK right now. And I've got a few staff that are based in Europe helping us specifically track some of the codes and standards development efforts in Europe. So it's a number of different methods. We're one of many players in this industry that is needed to really communicate some of these more complex relationships between the benefits and some of the challenges of storage. But we bring we feel like we bring the utility perspective to the table and can help disseminate that message a little bit further.
And probably Catalina and Frank, really, is this the sort of stuff that you guys draw upon to disseminate to your members through your own information?
Yeah, so that's one of the recommendations. I think we need to learn very quick and be ahead of the curve. We are all learning together, so just bringing that knowledge that, for example, the EPRI provides, that is free. We have also very good information for DNVGL. They provide some webinars. They have some scorecard. Maybe we touch on that later. And one of our recommendations will be also to take open a database. And BASE did a very good report on PV fires. And we discovered that, for example, 30% of PV fires were caused by isolators. Maybe Charlie can talk on that. So that's very quick things that we can notice by doing that and studying the fires and being very open. That's what this group's trying to do. And when we have had incidents, the industry is willing to collaborate because we want to learn from each other. We're not trying to blame anyone, but to learn as quick as possible. And having this database in the UK, but internationally, will allow us to very quickly improve and prevent fires, the risk of fire. Yes.
Okay. So, and Frank, I guess this is a kind of open source topic, really, because everybody wants to learn from everybody else's experience, right? What do your members say to you? What does the industry and the participants think about the learning, and what they think about the standards in the area? Or are they happy the way things are?
Sure, that's a good question, I think, Dan. There is a suite of standards which have been developed in the UK as well, which are voluntary, such as the IET Code of Practice on the installation of electrical energy storage devices, which we worked very closely with the IET to develop, and it's recently been updated. So there are some kind of voluntary standards out there, and our subsidiary called Renewable Energy Assurance Limited, or REAL, runs the RECC scheme, which is designed to prevent consumer mis-selling of microgeneration and storage assets. And that scheme mandates that installers must comply with the IET Code of Practice, for example. So there's some quite good safeguards there at the moment. The problem we have in the UK, or the one situation we have in the UK, is that there's no specific subsidy or support for purely energy storage systems, which would lead to creating a kind of carrot or a stick to ensure that every single device is installed in the same way. So you don't get a feed-in tariff, for example, for a storage device, so which would have certain conditions which would be able to be attached to that. So where we have some more kind of installations which are going on from smaller players or rogue installers, maybe, which there are some, it's quite difficult to make sure that that's been done to the same standard as a REC accredited installer, for example. So that's a facet of the market in the UK, and I think internationally as well.
Okay, thanks, guys. I'm just going to quickly go back to something Mike mentioned about Arizona and something Justin asked about detection. Justin, what needs to be done given the Arizona reports, in your opinion, of course?
Well, yeah, it is obviously only my opinion. I mean, it's a fascinating report, and they talk a lot about learning the lessons from history, which I think is something we should all be doing, whatever industry we're in. The recommendations, what was particularly striking to me was the lack of training, and we've touched on that. Catalina's got some really good ideas, and Charlie, I know in particular, would appreciate that. But also the lack of gas detection. I think it's, I'm not new at all to the safety industry, and I've got a lot of experience in smoke and fire detection and the slowness really of standards and regulations catching up with the speed at which technology moves. But one thing that always fascinates me is how we look at installations or applications retrospectively. So if I make a rule today, and I know that it's good practice to follow X, Y, and Z, is it not incumbent upon me to look back upon previous installations or instances and apply the lessons I'm learning today to what's been done in the past? And I think that is something key for me in the safety industry generally.
I think one of the attendees has managed to get an eye of my notes, because just as I asked that, somebody asked specifically about the reports on the fire. So I'm going to quickly put that in there now. That's coming from somebody watching towards Mike. They're asking.
Can I just say one thing? There's a really interesting podcast that I listened to the other day, afterthefirepodcast.com, and if anybody can't find that link or wants it, it was really, really instructive. Yeah, I'm trying to learn a lot, but this involved. Sorry.
What was it called? Sorry, After the Fire Podcast.
Afterthefirepodcast.com,
Okay,
and it was a recent recording, and it was really interesting, and it had some of the people involved in that instance, and really instructive, and it's worth listening to. It's an hour long, but it's a good use of your time.
Okay, I was going to say, when I ask the next question, if you go and find it on the internet and put it in the chat room, but I think Lucy's already done it. Thank you very much, Mike. I'm going to quickly ask you, Mike, around the reports on the fire, and somebody specifically said, can you comment on the root causes that were assigned to it?
Sure. Yeah. There's, I can't speak to the exact root causes because I unfortunately was not involved in that investigation. But I can tell you that the reports, of course, there's some disagreement among the different parties authoring those reports. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the reports came from DMVGL, and the Underwriters Laboratory, Firefighter Safety Research Institute, and then from Exponent on behalf of LG Chem. And so, of course, there's a little bit of disagreement, but around the specifics, but there are a lot of areas of agreement that I think the industry can really learn from. So the first thing is that I think DMV GL does a pretty good job of detailing how these incidents occur, what causes them, the different root causes, and we've also published some similar material that aligns with that a few years ago. The biggest issue is that cell failures can occur, and there are times where it's difficult to do anything to prevent the cell failure from occurring. I think the issue is how is that addressed? How is propagation prevented? And so we know that that water suppression can be a very effective method to do that. Unfortunately, the Arizona site did not have that. We know that detailed monitoring of systems can be a good way of understanding events before they happen, some preconditions, as well as tracking events as they progress. We also know that clean agent can be effective in some non-thermal runaway fires, like an electrical fire in the enclosure that may induce thermal runaway, but may not be able to stop thermal runaway. And then I think one of the biggest lessons learned is that cell failure can occur in different ways. You can have venting of flammable off gases that ignite and create a fire. You can have venting of flammable off gases that don't ignite and create an explosive atmosphere. And even some of the test methods have evolved to try and identify these kinds of failure modes and quantify those failure modes, but they're not 100% determinate yet. And so I think the lessons are that these failures can happen, that some of the mechanisms put in place, the mitigation mechanisms a few years ago to address this may not have been sufficient, may not have fully addressed all of the hazards, and that that going forward, there are good ways to quantify those hazards and mitigate those hazards in future systems.
Yeah. I mean, what do we do about stuff that's already installed that's years old? I mean, probably one for well, Charlie and Justin, really. Should we be looking at retrospectively applying measures to existing installations? Should we be going and inspecting existing installations? Where do you guys stand on stuff that's already out there and has been either up and running static or in other applications? Presumably you've been looking at things like data centers for donkey's ears. Should there be some sort of retrospective application of a safety framework? Justin first? No. Charlie first, in case then.
Always let Charlie go first.
Okay, sorry. I think from a fire service perspective, we're not the regulator for the industry, so we have to be minded of that. We would do inspections if it was part of an occupied building, but I think certainly for London Fire Brigade, the key bit for us is the event foreseeable. Now, if you've got a foreseeable event that's got the potential to either harm people or harm the environment, why would you not want to apply a retrospective look to it to actually see that it's safe, or can anything be done? Certainly, we've spent a lot of time since Grenfell in reflecting on in terms of what's foreseeable. And I think really that is a case of from a much wider point of view. And this comes back to some of the discussion about regulation. It's as the industry moves on, not with old, with new, it's just really essential that while we're not looking to over-regulate everything, if we know something could fail catastrophically and could have those effects, it's going to be a difficult day in court if one of us is standing there saying we knew about it but we didn't do anything.
Yeah, fair enough. Justin, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's why I let Charlie go first, because I don't think I can add much to that, to be honest. Yeah, I know it's tricky. I hate to sound mercenary about it, but obviously there's severe cost implications going back retrospectively to current pre-existing installations. I understand that, but we have to rise above that. I think if there's an issue that we're aware of now, and we have technology or systems and processes that can help, we have to deal with it. We have to find a way to deal with it.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike, what were you going to ask?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add 2 quick points that Charlie inspired. The first thing is that another key takeaway from those reports is the importance of coordination and communication, specifically among the operators as well as with first responders and even the neighboring community. And as a part of that, a lot of our members are actually looking at their existing sites. A lot of utilities are looking at their existing sites and actually talking about these issues, identifying that there were things that need to be remediated, and going back and doing those studies to understand the cost of retrofit versus the trade-offs in probabilistic safety. So I think it's an important thing to talk about these issues so that everyone involved is aware. And then inevitably that does raise the question that I think Charlie said, how could you not do something about it now that you know it exists?
I will add also a couple of things. I will say it's not only the site itself, it's also how you operate the site. So it's on understanding how much can you cycle the site, the temperature you should keep the site safe temperature. That will depend on chemistries, and I will let either Mike or Justin give more insights on what they think of the different chemistries. But that gives us also an understanding that not everyone can buy a battery, put a battery, and just operate the battery. Just a lot you need to know. You need to be an expert. You need to understand the different chemistries, where you are, how you should operate the battery, and the risk that you're doing. But the way you manage the battery also, I think there's important to have communication. And as an example, I will use the state of charge. So it's not the same to have a fire when the battery is discharged than when the battery is 90% charged. So the risk is different. If the fire brigade could understand that, and also if we could have some measurements of, as I say, gases, that will be very good. So if they could have a very quick access to the O&M team, and that's why it's important to have an O&M team that can be easily reachable, it can be reached at any time if there's no one on the site, because not all, for example, standalone batteries will have someone on site all the time. But it's important to have a good O&M team. So it's also not only the battery itself, but it's also the team behind and the company that runs the battery.
Yeah, good comments from everybody, in fact. Moving on to, let's move around current standards and where we are kind of today and where we're going to be in the future. Probably one for Frank and the REA, because you guys obviously lobby quite hard for energy storage, because it's an enabler to us having a cleaner living world and a net zero system. What have you guys discussed around current standards? You mentioned you'd worked quite closely with the IET earlier. What's the current kind of, or what's the next steps for standards in this area for you guys?
Sure. First of all, I'm not a health and safety expert or technical expert at all, but clearly, as kind of standard bearers for the storage industry, we recognise the huge importance of this area. As I mentioned, we worked with the IET 4 years or so ago now to develop the code of practice on electrical energy storage. That's been updated. It will be updated regularly. BEIS in the UK have done a great job recently at convening the broader industry and setting up a health and safety committee for energy storage. And that committee, which we sit on, as does ESN and Catalina, is involved in undertaking a gap analysis at the moment about the health and safety situation regarding energy storage in the UK, which will be coming up with a number of recommendations for how to address those. So that's something which we're very clearly very much behind, and we recognise the value of that. There's also the BSI committee, ESL 120, which we're involved in, which has done a similar work and will be doing a similar work around, could there be a need for a PAS standard, for example, in this area in the UK. So we are very keen that we get to the right situation. We're also very aware of the fact that we don't want to stifle innovation by moving too hard too quickly. We need to strike a good balance between allowing innovation, allowing the market to develop, and having the best possible standards in place. And I'm sure there's something we can end up with there. So yeah, lots of initiatives in this space. It's all quite, in the past, it's been a bit of a patchwork of activities. So I think BEIS coming together, bring the industry together and starting to do this coordinated work is really powerful, and we're certainly very behind that.
Good stuff. Justin, you and I chatted about insurance, and when I worked on one of the really early stage kind of pre-lithium batteries on a bid years ago, insurers didn't really know anything about it, and they didn't really know what to do either. Do they now? Do we need more industry involvement directly from the insurance companies? How involved are they in the sector?
Well, from my, I'm going to say, limited research so far, I think we do need them to be more involved, and it can only help. They, rightly or wrongly, have a huge part to play in safety generally, and they hold the purse strings sometimes, so they need to get more involved. And I just want to go back a little bit, follow up on what Frank said. One of the things on standards across Europe, they seem to be a little bit disjointed at the moment, and I'd love to, really get some commonality. I'm aware that a very interesting group, EASE, European Association for Energy Storage, they're working on a specific task force for safety at the moment, and the FIA, the Fire Industry Association in the UK, has produced a lithium battery storage guidance document. But it would be fantastic if they were all joined up together, and I'm sure that would make it a lot easier for all the stakeholders and parties involved in the industry. But insurance has got to play a big part. And not be bullying, I think that's something else I would say.
What was your last point, sorry?
And not be too much of a bully sometimes. I think they've got to help.
Yeah, I'm not sure insurers and help go hand in hand, but I won't get too involved in that. My wife works for the biggest one and is currently discussing a claim in another room of the house. What about the trade bodies, guys? What do Catalina and Frank think about? Was it relevant? Did you have much input from the insurance organisations or the bodies, Catalina, in the
we haven't liaised with the insurance because we don't have an insurance company in our group. But what I could say about insurance is now, for example, to assure them on the risk, they can use, for example, the DNVGL scorecard and some of the tests they do. I don't know, the EPRI does something similar. So they test on the fire situation, I think different chemistry, and that gives them a little bit more of assurance. But I also say it depends on who is managing, how we're managing. So I haven't liaised with them, so I don't have their opinion. But also to come back a little bit on standards, I agree that various members, in particular manufacturers, they ask for the UK to align with the US, Europe, and other legislations, and not to create our completely different legislation. And on Frank was speaking about the BSI and different codes, 120 and PEL 21, which is secondary cells and batteries, and 120 is electric energy storage, ESL something. Sorry, so to come on the standards, what I will say is we invite BSI and other standards to ask for the input of members. For instance, we have an ESN member, I'm gonna say Zenobi, I'm not based, but this is one of my colleagues, and he was also at the fire brigade, a volunteer. So he has both sides on installation and the fire brigade. And even if he's not the person on regulation that you will normally come, I was having a conversation with him, and he's now part of this committee, I think. So don't hesitate for the standards to also think about coming to the industries and having this in the field knowledge. That could be very interesting input, and keeping an international outlook as well.
Cool. Anything on top of that, Frank?
No, I think it sounds like Catalina's colleague is an extremely helpful person in this space. So. Yeah, I won't add to that. I know we're short on time.
we've got a few minutes left. I'll see if any questions, anything else comes in from the chat room. But I think the kind of final one for me probably is for you, Charlie, around innovation and next generation of stuff within the energy sector. Having only really spent my career in the energy sector, I can confidently say that innovation pretty much outpaces regulation in every facet and always has done. And given the speed at which this sector is evolving, what are the challenges for you guys in trying to even consider keeping pace with that level of innovation before the standards exist?
Well, I always think it's good to end on a positive note, but I'm not sure that I can, because the fire service having to respond to everything from animal rescue to sort of flooding response and everything else. I'm not sure we can fully keep pace, which is why the partnership working is really important with industry and where appropriate with government and the regulator, because that's the way forward. The bit for me is possibly around the people who tend to help try and form the codes of practices and standards and working groups tend to be the responsible people in the industry. I think the challenge for us is when you get the local supermarket selling your sort of 500 kilowatt portable storage pack for 50 quid, or the people, as the industry starts to get saturated, the people trying to do the installations, and obviously, as per, again, quoting Grenfell, I think it was described as the race to the bottom. So I think our probably biggest concern isn't innovation, because I think that's something we should really welcome for many reasons and we should embrace. But it's just how do we also make sure we pick up collectively with industry so that it's not just the responsible players, but all the players that are captured, and that hopefully we make it as safe as we can.
And you do a very good job. I think it's probably, and to end on such a positive note, I think there's a lot of work by guys on this call as well, by trade bodies in particular, and a lot of safety standards and a lot more awareness and education in everything from the building inspectors, the local authorities for planning and regulation, all the way up to the kind of the government bodies. And the next generation of storage devices have a huge amount of focus on trying to avoid rare metals and minerals, and also trying to be as safe as possible. So I think that there is a natural move in that direction. So I think there are no further questions, and we're just coming to the end of it now. So I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody, for your time this afternoon, and flip back to Lucy.
Great, thank you very, very much to all the panelists, and especially to Dan for leading the discussion so seamlessly. Just wanted to apologise again for the delayed start to the session, but I think it was a great session, and it will be recorded, so anybody who wants to view this on demand will be able to. I just thought this was a good time to mention, when we're talking about safety, obviously we've got Mike from across the pond anyway. And I just wanted to mention that safety is a big part of our Energy Storage USA conference, which will be taking place in just a matter of weeks, starting on the 23rd of March. So again, we'll be discussing some of the topics that we talked about. So, liaising with the fire service, codes and standards, and how to set them and kind of, streamline them across the industry, as well as thermal runaway. So I think that's all very, very important discussions to continue. So I just wanted to say thank you very, very much. And I'm sure the panelists will all be happy for you to reach out with any further questions, either via LinkedIn or via the portal, and I hope everybody enjoyed. And thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.